The chair lays out House Bill 1838 and recognizes Chairwoman Gonzalez to explain her bill.
Hello, my Vice Chair. How are you?
Well, good to see you here.
We're going to talk about a topic we've talked about in our subcommittee, so I think you might enjoy this. Hello, Chairman and committee, Eddie. I'm really excited to lay out House Bill 1838, and I think I might have a committee sub.
Yes, I was going to ask you that. We do have a committee substitute, so the chair offers up the committee substitute to House Bill 1838. And you are free now to explain your bill.
Thank you so much. A constituent told me that some Texans, in particular motorcyclists, are being entered into our state criminal gang database called Texas Gang, sometimes on questionable grounds and sometimes in obvious error. People are placed in this database usually without their knowledge and may not only find out when something negative happens. For example, if they have trouble entering a secure facility when looking for a job or when they're being detained while legally carrying a firearm. Once a person discovers they're in the database, they may not be able to find out why and or challenge their inclusion into it, and so the process is very obscure, difficult, and uncertain. HB 1838 would raise the standard for inclusion in the database, as well as provide reasonable due process for those included in the database by requiring notice and clear routes to appropriate removal. Basically, what we're trying to do is transparency. It would create greater transparency to those included and to the public, and seeks to ensure that the information in the database is actually meaningful and relevant for law enforcement use. Computer science has long used the phrase. HB 38 would help reduce unnecessary information in the database. And so just to give you some background, the committee sub that you see today does a couple of things. First, it exclusively focuses on the DPS gang database, not to be confused with the TDCJ one. And second, it works to talk about audits of the database and assurance that information older than 10 years old remains valid. As members, we really want to make sure that people don't face unnecessary consequences because they're on this database, and we just want to create some transparency. I think you'll hear some compelling stories as to the issues in which the database has created, and I look forward to having the conversation. And with that, I reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, any questions? All right. Chair calls Chris Ward.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Ward. I represent Texas Council of Clubs and Independents, and I'm for this bill.
Thank you.
Okay. I serve as a volunteer legislative liaison, as I said, for Texas Council of Clubs and Independents. I come before you today to represent over 330,000 registered motorcyclists and bikers across Texas. Let me start by saying that nothing about our presence here today or introduction of this bill is rooted in any anti-law enforcement sentiment or intent, nor does it discount the original intent of the database to be solely used as an investigative tool meant to keep our fellow citizens safe. Unfortunately, we are seeing increasing reports, some you will hear today, of this investigative tool being used as a punitive one, handing down sentences without the right to due process, casting a wide net, sacrificing dolphins at the possibility of catching a tuna or two. As the president of my club, I can attest that 4 members of the club were found to be in the gang database. They have no felonies, and in the 5 or more years having known them and called them brothers, have never been found guilty of any crimes. And we wear no identifying markers of any group identified in the Texas DPS gang assessment, threat assessment. Across the state, we are getting reports of people being erroneously entered into the Texas gang database, the results costing jobs, being ejected from foreign countries, or being arrested for being a gang member in possession of a firearm, even though they passed all background checks qualifying them for a concealed handgun license. As a result of these reports and the 2 federal cases, one in El Paso and one in Bexar County, we conducted a short experiment requesting people to find out if they are indeed in the gang database. We used a public information request process, and in that 2 months, we found about 10 cases that were reported to us by members of the MC community being confirmed in this database. Even though law enforcement could not associate those members continuously or regularly associating in any commission of criminal activities, and have no association with any listed group in the Texas DPS threat assessment. We simply seek relief from a weaponized investigative tool. We do not believe it is too much to ask to be notified that you are being submitted to the gang database. I'm happy with just a letter that says, pick better friends. Okay? Strengthen submission criterion and remove potential hearsay. Notify someone if they are included in the Texas gang database. Provide sufficient time to challenge the designation. Make fees associated with the challenges affordable. Provide clear-cut path, as discussed, to get that designation removed. Allow the accused and their lawyer to see evidence used to input them in the database under Texas disclosure laws. Clarify expectations related to records improperly used to input that suspected gang member. And finally, accountability to the taxpayer on how the database is being used. We have been getting reports way too often of the subjective process of law enforcement is using to add people to the database and are clearly not following or educating their officers or troopers on the Texas Gang Index operating policies and procedures under their general provisions. I could speak for an hour on the problem facing bikers for simply wearing a patch, a U.S. Supreme Court confirmed right to free speech. But hopefully you will get a better sense from the remaining testimonies here today.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time. I hope you pass.
Thank you. Members, any questions?
Yes, sir.
For those 4 individuals in your
Yes.
group, how did they end up finding out that they were on the list?
Public information request. So you can go through the Texas DPS website. You you send them an email and you say, I would like to request to see if I'm in the gang database. They return an email back to you asking for basic information. They will come back to you and say, yes, we found matching markers in our database or marker identifying criteria based on what you've provided. And then you know you're in. As a funny story, not funny for me, funny for y'all, I requested that information myself Sunday morning at 6 o'clock, waking up, getting ready for church, and I get an email come through the phone and it said, we found your identifying markers in the gang database. 30 minutes later, I get another email saying, oops, sorry, you're not in that database. So at the end of the day, of a man of semantics in my job, it was nice to know that I was not in the gang database, but I wanted to know what that meant.
On that one instead of.
Right.
Got it.
So just, yeah, go ahead.
Do you know if these 4 individuals had to go out and seek legal counsel to have their names removed, and what was that process? Just generally, you don't have to
Sure.
give me.
They have
give
not
us-
yet. It's very cost prohibitive. You'll hear one case today of a gentleman who has filed a federal case to get that out because they had to go to the federal courts to get a fair shake. To be put out. Because technically the current process is you file a grievance, $400 fee, you have to pay your lawyers, that goes in front of a judge. The judge looks at the information, does not give that information to your attorney, makes the assessment right then at the bench and says, yes, you're in or no, you're not. So again, no discovery law used, no right to due process. And the effects of being in that gang database and what it has on your constitutional rights is pretty detrimental. And even not constitutional rights, enhanced charges, things of that nature, if for some reason you were to be in an altercation or that nature.
Yeah.
So,
I received at least 2 calls from elected officials.
Yes.
That they had concerns because they are in regular bike organizations.
Yep.
And they were concerned either their members or themselves would be added to the list. So that's one of the reasons why I like this bill, and visiting with Representative Gonzalez, I signed on as a co-author. Do you believe that the bill, the way it's worded, will facilitate for you all the process by which you can seek the recourse that you need?
I do, based on starting with the notification. I'd like to I know I'm being accused of something first, right? Because it's really hard to be arrested on the side of the road for something you didn't know. You had no idea that you were in a database that made you a criminal. By being called a gang member, you've already assigned guilt to something, right? Without ever being able to face your accuser or go in front of a court. So just the sheer, quote, gang member mantra or definition in itself carries weight. And then you put, the following laws, even though we've tried to follow every rule we can as far as concealed carries and all that kind of stuff, it's not enough. And we still are at threat of being arrested for simply wearing a patch.
Well, great. Thank you for coming
Yeah.
and presenting your testimony. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much, Eddie. Okay, let's go to Emily Taylor. Chair calls Emily Taylor. She registered for House Bill 1838. Emily Taylor. Dylan Price. Okay. Oh, here they come. Okay, let's go ahead and bring Emily up. Oh, do you have an overflow room? Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You get me out of breath running in high heels.
Okay.
My name is Emily Taylor. I represent myself. I am testifying for this bill. Just as a reminder, in case the committee forgets from last week, I am an attorney who specializes in firearms and self-defense law with the Houston law firm of Walker and Taylor. We work in conjunction with a legal defense for self-defense group called Texas Law Shield, which has just under 300,000 members in the state of Texas, many of them members of motorcycle clubs of all varieties. Now, we do see this as a significant issue, and this bill is a wonderful step in resolving the issue. However, the alterations to 67.101, which spells out, and would spell out in this bill, that the database does not limit any rights granted by the U.S. Constitution or Texas Constitution, is wonderful in theory. In practice, we need to do more to make sure that it is not abused and not restricting the Second Amendment rights of otherwise law-abiding citizens who are just simply riding their motorcycle. There is another bill coming up today that I believe does just that. I think in conjunction, they are wonderful. This is one important key to that process.
Okay, members, any questions? Thank you so much, Ms. Taylor. Chair calls Dylan Price.
Hi there, my name is Dylan Price. I'm also an associate at the law firm of Walker and Taylor. I'm here today testifying on behalf of myself, and I am for this bill. So just to second what Emily said and what the previous gentleman had said, I think this bill does a great job at clarifying what the database is, and it provides clarity to people who are put on that database as to when they're put on it and how to remove themselves from the database. I think it's unconstitutional that there's a database out there that people who are on it can be profiled and are held to a higher standard than normal, ordinary citizens. So I think this bill's good, and I think it should pass through committee.
Questions, members? Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have an overflow room in E2.026. So our next three is William Apodaca Fisk, Paul Landers, and Jim Harris. William Apodaca Fisk, you can come up to the podium, and then Mr. Landers and Mr. Jim Harris. Jim Harris, you'll be next. Sir, if you could state your name, who you're representing, and your position on the bill.
Yes, sir. My name's William Apodaca Fisk. I'm with the New Mexico Council of Clubs. I'm representing myself as well, and I'm for this bill.
Okay.
Again, my name's William Apodaca Fisk. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm a retired Army Command Sergeant Major with 25 years in the Army, 8 combat tours, multiple awards, including 2 Purple Hearts. I have 2 master's degrees. I'm married with 4 children, all with graduate degrees. My wife and daughter are school teachers. Since retirement, I've been focused on volunteering for the homeless and for veterans, and I'm currently the president of Donna Ana County Humane Society. I'm very politically active. I've never been arrested, nor have I any criminal history. By all accounts, someone you'd want as your neighbor. Except in the state of Texas, I'm considered a gang member. I was placed on the database because I'm a member of an all-veterans motorcycle club, none with criminal records, solely because I wear a vest, my First Amendment right. This restricts my other rights. It restricts my rights to travel to El Paso to get VA health care and benefits at Fort Bliss. It restricts and chills my participation in political and charitable events that I commonly did. And as stated in my 1986 federal case by the El Paso Police Department, I am subject to arrest for legally carrying my licensed concealed carry weapon while wearing my motorcycle vest, forcing me to choose between my First and Second Amendment rights. Misinterpretation and misuse of the database caused me to file a 1986 federal civil rights suit, as I felt the secret hearing between a judge and a law enforcement agent afforded me no fair account, no discovery, and no due process. I challenge you to review Officer Balderrama's deposition in my case and learn what some law enforcement believe about motorcyclists and their rights. Judges' rulings in both our federal and state cases state that entry into the database alone is not probable cause for search, seizure, or weapons arrests. These cases cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to the state and to the local community, and are often dismissed after 3 or 4 years,
Sergeant,
making the accuracy of the database questionable at best.
yeah, Sergeant Major, are your career which service?
Army.
Army. Thank you for your service. How did you find out that you were on the database?
I had to do a public record request after hearing that several other of my friends had been added to the database, some of which were arrested for gang member possession of a weapon, solely for concealed carry permitted weapons, by the way. They were legally owned, legally permitted weapons. They were pulled over and arrested. And so I checked mine, and there I was. I have a top secret clearance. I still maintain a diplomatic passport, but I am a gang member in Texas.
Okay.
And I am still on that database after a federal case.
Okay. Members, any questions for the Sergeant Major? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Chair recognizes Representative Tenderholt, present. Thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you. Chair recognizes Paul Landers. After Paul Landers, we'll have Jim Harris, Chaz Moore, Warren Berkeley. So if you're in the overflow room, make your way here if I've just announced your name. Yes, sir, my friend. Your name?
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Landers. Thank you, committee, for listening to us today. It's great to see representatives in the House. I've been involved with the motorcycle rights movement in Texas since '96. Representative Thompson. We've testified before committees. We've had honorable speakers be keynote speakers at our events. We are a cross-section of America. We have motorcycle clubs, we have Christian clubs, we have service clubs. We're well represented. We're not criminals, but I'm here today in support of our bill, 1838, because I am now, after 25 years of working in the Capitol with, rest in peace, Sputnik and lots of other individuals and activists, I'm listed as a gang member in this database. I am a survivor of a horrible incident that happened in Waco, Texas, May 17th, 2015. We were there to conduct a political meeting as protected speech. I was hanging a banner, and some individuals that didn't like necessarily what we were doing caused a horrible incident. It's the most prolific case of profiling and scripted involvement with individuals that had no business being there that we've ever seen. It's disrupted our lives. It's ruined our careers. It's caused us immeasurable damage financially, spiritually, emotionally, and I have submitted 4 different Freedom of Information requests to find out why I'm in the database because of Waco. There's no remedy when I can get off of it. What are the ramifications? I was trying to retire. I had a stellar career in corporate America, and that was dissolved overnight. We had a wonderful conference Representative Tinderholt spoke at our meeting with 2,000 individuals, just like we have here today, and there was 0 incidents. After that point in time, it was a ramped-up effort to just a rubber stamp.
Yeah, and Mr. Landers, I want to make sure the record is right, because I'm hearing your passion. Are you on, for, or against this legislation?
I am for this legislation, 1838.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm looking here on the screen, it says against, so we can change it to for.
Please do. That's public, West Texas Public Education. I made that.
Okay, you're all right. You're all right. Hey, okay, you're all right.
I apologize.
No, you're all right.
I'm an old
you're all
guy
right.
too, man.
Hey, I'm just trying to get it straight.
My eyes don't see so well. I hit the wrong dot.
Let me ask you-
I am definitely for this bill.
And you're representing?
I'm an advisory board member with the Texas Council of Clubs and Independents.
Okay, members, any questions for Mr. Landers? Hey, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Goodwin present. Okay, now we'll have Jim Harris. After Jim Harris, we'll have Chaz Moore, Warren Berkeley. How you doing, sir?
A little nervous, but doing well.
Okay, well, take a deep breath and think about this. State your name, who you're representing, and the position on the bill.
Jim Harris, Texas Council of Clubs and Independents, and I am for the bill.
You got your 2 minutes.
My name is Jim Harris. I'm a psychotherapist, professor of psychology at Houston-Tillotson University, and PhD student. In May of 2015, I was among the nearly 200 men and women who were arrested in Waco, Texas. I spent 11 days in jail, issued a $2 million bond, depleted my life savings hiring counsel, and remain haunted by the indelible mark placed on my record to this very day. Unbeknownst to me, being arrested wearing a vest without being charged or indicted was enough to place me on the Texas gang database, a move that did not come with a duty to notify. My first red flag should have been passed over for my dream job after a background check. My second red flag should have been when the state licensing board refused to issue my license to practice psychotherapy, taking 6 months of pleading my case before I was finally granted my license. But the most egregious and the most humiliating revelation came in 2017 when I was detained in Guadalajara, Mexico. I went to Mexico on a humanitarian trip with Dr. Patch Adams. As I attempted to go through customs, I was handcuffed and interrogated regarding my gang affiliation. After 3 hours, I was ultimately informed that I was not allowed in the country and had to be placed on the first flight out. In present day, I live with the constant fear of persecution every time I leave my home. The looming threat of being targeted as a gang member without evidence is far more prominent than the physical risks of riding a motorcycle. A system that has carte blanche to make a life-altering decision with infinite potential to cause harm under the guise of protecting the public flies in the face of the very freedoms and liberties these hallowed halls exist to protect. The Texas Gang Database is no longer a tool for protection, but now a weapon for suppression. In the words of Adlai Stevenson, the tragedy of our day is the climate of fear in which we live, and fear breeds repression. Too often, sinister threats to the Bill of Rights, to the freedoms of the mind, are concealed under the patriotic cloak of anti-communism. Or in this case, those of us who dare to live free and challenge the commonplace. Stevenson also recognized that it is far easier to fight for principles than to live up to them. Please take this opportunity to live up to the principles we are here to fight for today.
Any questions for Mr. Harris? Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chaz Moore. After Chaz Moore, we'll have Warren Berkeley, Scott Henson, and Rick Briscoe.
Good evening, Chair White, committee. First, Chaz Moore, Executive Director and founder of the Austin Justice Coalition, and I am for this bill. The very first guy said everything I was going to say, and it's very telling that, first of all, Mr. Landers got Representative Tinderholt to smile and laugh, so that's always a good thing. And then also, Rep. Gonzalez, I think the people you have today testifying, you have PhD folks that have served in the military, and just because they like to represent their club, their colors, whether it be red and yellow banditos or whoever, they're labeled a gang because of probably what happened in Waco for sure. And people watch Sons of Anarchy, which was a really good show, but it's not anywhere close to what actually happens in these motorcycle clubs. These are upstanding citizens for the most part, and just like any other group of people, including you all's job, right? It's some bad apples in every bunch, but what shouldn't happen is that people should be penalized just because they like to ride bikes, because they like to ride bikes together, and because they appear to be something that they are not, in this case, which is a gang member. So I'm always for anything that is not going to penalize people for what they look like, because although I don't ride a bike, the patch that I was born with is my skin color, and you all know how that discrimination looks. And because these gentlemen and women that choose to ride their bikes choose to do so in whatever fashion that they do, they shouldn't be put in a gang database unless they deserve that right. And as you heard, it's people here that their lives have been tossed upside down because they appear to be something that they're not. So again, Rep. Gonzalez, thank you for attempting to pass this thoughtful legislation, and I hope this gets all the respect it rightfully deserves.
Any questions of Mr. Moore? Always good to always good to have you in our presence. Thank you, sir. Okay, let's go to Warren Berkeley, then Scott Henson and Rick Briscoe. And as Mr. Berkeley is making his way toward us, we're going to go ahead and say if there's anyone else that wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1838, make it down here to the clerk, assistant clerk, so we can get you logged in. Go ahead, my friend.
Warren Berkeley. I am the Community Outreach Director of Austin Justice Coalition, and I am for the bill. My friends and family, we all love to ride. I ride. I think it's ridiculous that if I want to put a patch on or a vest and ride in solidarity with other people, that can potentially label me a criminal for the rest of my life. I think it's overreaching and unnecessary.
Okay, questions? Thank you, my friend. Chair recognizes Scott Henson, and then we'll have Rick Briscoe.
Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Scott Henson. I'm here on behalf of Just Liberty, and I'm in support of the bill. There's been some great testimony, and I'm going to not repeat any of it, but would endorse it all. I was very glad to hear somebody shout out Sputnik. God bless him. He'd be very proud of the bikers showing up to do this today. I did want to flag that when we talk about the gang database, this is a loosey-goosey mechanism that all of a sudden got turned on a large class of people all at once. The same loosey-goosey mechanisms were being applied before. This was a problem when the gangs being targeted were mostly black and brown folks. But what we've seen is sort of a natural experiment where after Twin Peaks, they took this apparatus and pivoted and turned it on a new category of folks who all of a sudden were like, wow, this is what it's like when an overreaching state, starts to extend its powers into my life. And you've heard some wonderful examples of how devastating that can be. So that's really all I have to say, except thank you so much for bringing this bill. And if y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Questions of Mr. Henson? Thank you, Grit.
Thank you.
All right. Grits for breakfast. Yeah. Chair calls Rick Briscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I am Rick Briscoe, representing Open Carry, Texas, speaking in favor of the bill. You've probably heard me introduce our organization in the past as a Texas grassroots civil rights organization specializing in First, Second, and Fourth Amendment issues. And we also speak up for veterans on veterans issues. There are many men in this room and men sitting on the committee who've sworn the oath to support and defend our Constitution and uphold the principles we hold dear. A right without a remedy, however, is no right at all. The current procedure places an intolerable burden upon the citizen to challenge a very arbitrary determination by a bureaucratic agency of the government. We think that is simply not only not good policy, but not acceptable. As such, these gentlemen who choose to ride on two wheels instead of four have been selectively discriminated against. Who's next? Sports Car Club of America, Open Carry, Texas. We've actually held discussions in the past about whether we would be classed as a gang because we gather in groups and we're T-shirts saying Open Carry Texas, come and take it, hold flags that say various things and
Yeah.
pass out literature. Where does it end? And so this bill, we believe, is a good first step towards providing citizens the opportunity to avoid being discriminated against and having no say in whether it's true or not.
Where does it end when they start rounding up the legislatures and put us on list? That's when it ends. We're all standing around, hollering and screaming. Okay, we got it. Questions? Thank you. All right. Okie doke. Members, any questions for the author? Well, before we get there, is there anyone else that wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 1838? Public testimony is now closed, and the chair recognizes Chairwoman Gonzalez to close on HB 1838.
Thank you, Chairman and the members. I'm sure you've heard wonderful testimony. All we're asking to do is create a process and transparency on this database, and I respectfully ask for your favorable consideration.
Hold on a second. We're going to have some questions for you. Let's start with Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez, for bringing this bill. I do think this is a good bill. In my study of the penal code members and dealing with some of the firearms issues, I came across this criminal street gang provision that penalizes people for carrying a firearm, okay? And as I studied it, I learned that there was no other reason for the person to be disqualified from being near a handgun in this specific circumstance. They'd could perhaps never been convicted of a crime. In fact, the same person could go to Florida and get a handgun license. And yet be a criminal if they carried in the state of Texas. And so that is a very, it's on its face, an inequity in our law. And, I think when you come to Second Amendment rights, you come to freedom of association under the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we need to put a lot more due process in place, members, in my opinion. I think this is a good bill, and I think we need to work on it.
Okay, yes, continue working with the members on it. Come see me, I had some notes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but we know the trajectory you're on. Any other questions for the author? Chair recognizes Representative Tenderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I was late
That's
today.
okay.
Had some people in my office, but I get there's also the flip side. I agree. I think this is a good bill. The flip side is that I know law enforcement uses this for specific purposes. So I want to make sure that when we do this bill, that we do it right, so we don't take away the ability for law enforcement to keep guns out of hands of the people that should not have them. And so I don't know what that looks like, but I like the intent of this bill, and I like the where it's headed, but I want to make sure that we're still able to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
No, of course. And look, I understand that there is a need for law enforcement to have information to do their jobs. And I work with, as chair of 145, a lot with DPS. And this is never about trying to harm the agencies. It's about making sure that we are not harming individuals' lives. Like you heard the testimony, people's lives were negatively impacted. And we do, as good government, should have transparency and due process, especially when it might impact people's rights and or their jobs and or their travel ability. And so it's really happy to work together. I do want you to know, as you know, I do my homework. We have made sure that there wouldn't be a negative impact, but always happy to try to do the right thing. So We'll talk to you, Chairman, and the rest of the committee.
Anyone else, members? Questions? Thank you, Chairwoman Gonzalez. The committee substitute is withdrawn, and if there is no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 1838 left pending. Chair calls.